Hi guys, Aceface back with another video for you, and I'm back with another Tyranid Tactics video for you. Advice from the Hive Mind, some advanced Tyranid Tactica. And today we're going to be focusing on another cool unit, which is the Carnifex. Before we get started, I just want to point you in the direction of a few places where you can catch me. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm extremely active on there, posting all the time. I'm like literally addicted to the thing. So you can follow me on Instagram. I also put up details and information on Facebook, let you know when I'm going to do my live shows, so I'm active there. And if you'd like to support me further, you can back me on Patreon, where we've got lots of different perks, loads of cool stuff. I've just introduced a new wicked Discord server, so you can get an opportunity to hang out with like-minded wargamers and chat and comment straight away and get an opportunity to talk to me. Really looking forward to catching up with you guys on there. And my perks start at $1, so you don't have to back a lot, and it really helps. Every little bit really helps me kind of making sure that I've got the models to show you, the opportunity to go to these events so I can bring you back the commentary and continue with giving you cool and up-to-date advice. But anyway, enough of that, let's jump straight into this video. And so today we are talking Carnifexes. Right guys, so as always I have my trusty codex. If you want to grab yours, it's a great way to kind of read through. Good opportunity for you to see where I'm potentially missing something, and sometimes just looking at a unit in a lot of detail can be really helpful. So grab your codex. The other thing that I was going to say is, if you don't want to see some Carnifex tactics, but there's other units that you want to look at, I already have a playlist that I'll chuck a little link up there, and you can jump over and see some of the other units that I've covered. And if there's a unit that you'd like to see me cover, then pop it in the comments below. First and foremost, I like to take the requests from my patrons around the next units, but if you want to put a description down there, get enough kind of likes and thumbs up on that particular suggestion, and I'll definitely try and put something up about that pretty soon. But anyway, let's jump into Carnifexes. So what I always say with these videos is, I'm assuming you kind of know the basics. I run through a little bit of basics, but on the whole we're talking about more how you're building these guys very competitively and how you're going to utilise and optimise the build on your Carnifexes. So we'll skip some options I'll kind of gloss over. It'll be much more around looking at the very cool options that you can take. So you've got three Carnifexes to choose from. So you've got the standard Carnifex, which I call your build your own Carnifex. You have the Screamer Killers, and you have the Thornbacks. Now the Screamer Killers and the Thornbacks do a very specific job. The Carnifex build your own Carnifex, understandably so, is an opportunity for you really kind of tailor it to what kind of fits your gaming style and what you want it to do. Majority of what we talk about today will be around the build your own Carnifex. It's probably the better way to go, but I will definitely highlight the advantages of taking either the Screamer Killer or the Thornback. So just bear that in mind, guys. So the Carnifex always used to be just your combat king. So going right back to second and third edition, just used to be the absolute killing monster machine. Now as things have gone on, they're not quite the same anymore. They used to be a huge, great big model. Slowly but surely they're fairly small now, to the opportunity now where you can take broods of Carnifexes. So just shows how times have changed. But that being able to take broods of Carnifex is one of their real strong strengths, and one definitely to highlight off the bat. So unlike a lot of our big monstrous creatures, the Carnifexes you can take in units of 3. Now the advantage of taking units of 3 means you can take that unit or 3 of them, and then they break up when you deploy them. So that means you're just getting 1 drop for the chance of 3 separate Carnifexes. That's really cool, because what you want to try to be doing as much as you can in competitive play is utilising that option of having a lot less drops. It's quite hard in Tyranids, because I find that you've got the opportunity to build big brigades and lots of battalions to build up those command points, and I think that's probably more important than utilising that drop. But it's something definitely to take into account. To be able to drop 3 monstrous creatures in 1 drop is a real key little trick and strategy you can do with these guys. So you could take 9 of these Carnifexes in 3 units of 3. That's 9 big monsters, and actually it's only 3 drops. So that's pretty cool. That's very, very cool, and something that we will definitely home in on as part of this real advanced Tyranid tactics. So the Carnifex used to be a combat king. He's now much more of a versatile unit. His advantage is definitely around his toughness, so he's still tough, still a tough egg to crack. It's toughness 7, which unlike a lot of the units in the game are going to be toughness 6, toughness 5. Being that toughness 7 means it's that much harder to get that reliable wounding on 4s or wounding on 3s. Makes things a lot more tricky, and very few things are going to be able to hurt him easily, which means that those heavy, hard-hitting weapons are going to be the ones that need to target the Carnifexes, which means they're not targeting other things, which is really, really cool. Because Carnifexes, another real strength for them is they're actually very reasonably cheap to get. As from a points point of view, you can build a Carnifex for like just basically 100 points a pop. So they are pretty cheap to run, which means you can take quite a few of these without soaking up all of your points. So that's very, very, very cool. Now, as well as them being that toughness 7, they have strength 6, they have 4 attacks, and also they have a handy wounds of 8. So wounds of 8 is great. It means you're not going to kill these guys particularly easy. They have a 3-up save. They also they don't have a degrading profile, which is also key, because their weapon skill is they hit on a 4, and their ballistic skill they hit on a 4, which is not awesome, but the fact that you know reliably that's unlikely to get much worse means that it doesn't really matter whether you've got a guy on 1 wound, he's still just as effective as if he's on 8 wounds, which is again a real strength in this unit. So from upgrades, you can take lots and lots of upgrades. You can make these guys very, very combat orientated. You can make them very, very shooty orientated. Now, there is nothing wrong with taking a full-on combat Carnifex. It looks probably the coolest. It looks very much, you know, harkens back to the good old days of a combat Carnifex. The chances are that you're going to want to have some shooting on that Carnifex. So when you're building it, don't necessarily go, well, I'm just going to have an all-out combat fix. And if you're going to go that way, you want to be looking at the Screamer Killer. The Screamer Killer is definitely the way to go. The Screamer Killer, you still have a nice little bit of assault because it has the Bioplasma Scream on there, which is still assault D6, strength 7, -4. It's got no way of getting hot. It's only going to do 1 damage, but it's still pretty good. And they have 2 sets of monstrous Scything Talons, which will give them an extra attack and mean they'll reroll 1s as well, making them a little bit more reliable. They have a little rule which allows them to -1 from everybody's leadership around, which is pretty effective as well. So if you're going to go full on combat and you want to go kind of classic Carnifex, still get yourself a little bit of shooting, but that's the way to go. What I would recommend probably is more looking at down a shooting variant of a Carnifex. And we're going to talk about the guns a little bit later. Obviously that's crucial, but there are some other upgrades that the Carnifexes give you the option to, and I want to talk about them probably because they're pretty key to building that Carnifex. So, as I said, I'm just going to reference my little book here. Right, okay, so any one model may have the following: Bioplasma, Enhanced Senses, Monstrous Acid Maw, or Tusks. So that's one of their options. Now the Enhanced Senses will give them a +1 to hit, meaning that they are going to hit on a 3+, and they'll always hit on that 3+, as we said. So I think that's quite key personally. It's not ridiculously expensive in points, and I think it's something that you want to be looking at. As I said, if you are going to go for something that is a little bit more combat orientated, there is nothing wrong with going for that Monstrous Acid Maw. That's very good. It is very strong because it means that there, if I can find it on here. So it's -5, and it is D3 damage, which is very, very good. So if you want to kind of stick on something that's a little bit combat orientated, then you can stick on the acid more. It's definitely a good option, and one that I have used a couple of times, and it does work well, and it will catch your opponent off guard a little bit. But for my liking, I would be looking at going for that enhanced senses to make sure that your Carnifex is hitting on a 3+ with the guns that we're going to talk about later. So that's one of his upgrade choices. The other upgrade choice that he has is he can take spine banks or sporocysts. Now, this is probably your real key to making this unit work, in my opinion. And the reason why this is so crucial is because, unlike other units that we've covered, like your Gene Stealers and your Hive Tyrant, where you've got a pretty good reliable invuln save, so a 5+ on the Gene Stealers, which is very good for an infantry unit, and a 4+ for your Hive Tyrant, which is incredibly powerful. The Carnifexes don't have that, and there's a hell of a lot of high strength, multi-damage weapons that are knocking around that will fry your Carnifexes like there is no tomorrow. You cannot afford that, you know, you absolutely cannot afford that. You need something that is going to make these guys that little bit more survivable. And the sporocysts mean that they need to -1 when they're attacking with a shooting weapon against the Carnifex. And that's massive. So those guys that are hitting on 3s are now hitting on 4s. Those guys that are hitting on 4s are now hitting on 5s. Which is ultimately very, very powerful for your Carnifexes, because it's going to mean that those Carnifexes now are able to walk up the board or run up the board and stay that little bit more safer, because they are that toughness 7. Things aren't wounding them very easily, but now you're making sure that they're -1 to hit them as well, so they're actually obviously struggling to hit them in the first place. You're taking that chance for those Carnifexes to take damage, you're taking it down quickly, and that's making them more efficient. That's meaning that the enemy's having to expend more firepower to deal with these Carnifexes, and that's what you want. That is what you want, because I don't think that you are building an army that is solely on Carnifexes, even though it's fun and fluffy, and you maybe want to be putting in quite a few of these guys. They're still going to be, on the whole, part of a strong list, and because they're part of a strong list, the enemy is going to have lots of different targets that they're going to have to prioritise. And they're going to be thinking about, well, actually, this is going to take me -1 to hit this. It's toughness 7. Ooh, my little stuff's not really going to hurt it very easy. How am I going to hose these guys down? They're starting to make them question how they're going to deal with them, and that's what you want. You want to be starting to tactically get in the mind of your opponent, make them make difficult decisions. Don't give them easy options, you know. And that's what this is all about, and that's what the Carnifex is about. And it's probably why the Carnifex has got that kind of very funny name of the, you know, of the little. Of the distraction Carnifex. It's kind of become a bit of a social joke, and very funny. So yeah. So you want to be building them with sporocysts. Literally, I'll just briefly say, you know, tusks. They will give you 1 extra attack in the chart when you charge. So again, if you're building that very, very combat orientated Carnifex, then you can look at tusks. But I'm telling you now, what's the point in building a combat Carnifex that's never going to make combat because it's going to get hosed down? There's no point. There's absolutely no point. So again, you're not going to be looking at tusks. You are going to be looking at the Screamer Killer, which has your sporocysts, is going to be a combat Carnifex. So there, they are probably your most important upgrades. I would have them on my both of them on each Carnifex every single day of the week, because you want your Carnifex being more effective itself and making the enemy less effective. Just think of those two combinations and they make sense every day of the week. Make your opponent worse, make you better. Why would you not take those options? So for me, you're taking them every single time. You're not missing out on those. So let's talk about these guns, and let's talk about the combat weapons as well. So the guns that your Carnifex can have, it can have a heavy Venom Cannon, it can have a heavy Stranglethorn Cannon, it can take Death Spitters and monstrous Death Spitters, it can take monstrous Devourers with the brain leechy wormy thingy jigs. And it can take a few other little shooty ones. So it can take things like the Bioplasma that we've spoken about. It can take the Spine Banks, which is another shooting attack. So it can take a few other little bits and pieces as well. But on the whole, your shooting options are your Devourers, your Death Spitters, your Stranglethorn Cannons, or your Heavy Venom Cannons. Let's talk about the Stranglethorn Cannon and the Venom Cannon first. Two weapons that, particularly the Venom Cannon, I've hated in previous editions, but actually now I really, really like. So, the Venom Cannon. So the Venom Cannon is Assault D3. So let's say 2. So you get 2 shots through on average. It's Strength 9, which is very, very good. It's -2 AP, which again is strong, and it is a flat 3 damage. That's really powerful. Very, very good. Really like that. 36-inch range, which is decent. Your Carnifex is moving 7, so that's good. That's decent. It means that you've got 42 inches when you're gonna 42-inch first turn threat range with that gun, which is decent. It's assault as well, so you're not having any minuses for moving with it, even though it's a heavy Venom Cannon, which I like. And obviously, because we've packed on that acute senses, it's now going to be hitting on a 3. So yeah, it's only D3 shots, but that's still decent. The Stranglethorn Cannon is D6 rather than D3. It's Strength 7 rather than Strength 9. It's -1 rather than -2. And it is 2 damage rather than 3. You can add 1 to the hit rolls of this weapon when attacking units with 10 plus models. So bear in mind that you're already hitting on 3s normally because you've taken your acute senses. You can be hitting on 2s against big units, but it is D6 shots. So the chances are, again, let's talk averages, you're getting 3 shots. So you're getting 3 shots that are, going to do all right. But it's not really it's not got enough shooting to be decimating big units. So yes, you're going to, if you're shooting a unit of 10, you're probably going to reliably kill a couple of them. But that in itself is probably not what you're looking at. So of those 2 weapons, you're probably going to be looking at your Venom Cannon. It's much more a weapon profile that is going to do damage and is going to do work. That Strength 9 means there's very few things it won't be wounding on a 3. So anything you get through, any amount of shots, you've got a good chance of actually doing some work there. And the 3 damage is a very scary profile. People will not like to be shot by that. So the Heavy Venoms are one definitely to consider. Now with both those weapons, you can only take 1 of those on your Carnifex, even though you have an option to take up to 4 weapons if you like. So 4, he's got 4 arms, so 2 of those arms are taken up by that Venom Cannon or by that Stranglethorn Cannon, and 2 of their arms are taken up by a different weapon, either a close combat weapon or by another shooting weapon. So I think it's a very, very good idea to take 1 of those 2 guns, and I would definitely recommend to take the Heavy Venom Cannon. I think it's a really good solid choice, and when you're hitting on 3s, there's a lot of damage potential there. So take that as 1. Then when you're looking at your second set of arms, that's when you can make a decision. So you can make a decision whether you want to make your Carnifex purely a shooting beast, or you want to make him a unit that is able to also do a fair bit of work in combat. Now, that is a decision that you guys are going to have to make yourselves, and that will be a decision on what you particularly like and what your play style is. Also what you have in the rest of your army. So if you have a lot of other high threat units that are also going to be assaulting the enemy and getting there in first, you've probably got an opportunity to take some combat weapons on your Carnifex. If you're taking a very sort of shooty army that is potentially going to be sitting back, or not necessarily advancing right into your opponent's face so quickly, you're probably going to not want to take a combat orientated Carnifex, because they're going to be coming at the opponent very, very quickly, and they're going to be dealt with very, very quickly. So in that point, you're definitely going to want to be going shooting. For me, I think there's nothing wrong with taking a bit of both. So taking a unit of Carnifexes that are very, very shooty, and a unit of Carnifexes that have got a bit of both. I definitely would not be going down the route of an all-out combat unit. For me, it just doesn't work in 8th edition. You are taking a knife to very much a gunfight, and the only way that knives work is when you're there and you're up close quickly. You don't have an effective way to get these guys up close quickly. So let's talk about those two options. So first of all, let me start off with the shooting. Now by now you're probably all very, very familiar with those shooting options. So if you take the Devourers, you are looking at taking 12. So 12 shots, should I say, sorry. So you're taking 2 sets, if you like, 1 set, 2 Devourers. It gets very confusing. But 12 shots, strength 6 with no AP, 18 inches, not too bad. It's quite a lot of DACA, and it does mean then you've got kind of almost like a very dual use Carnifex, shooting Carnifex. So you've got a Carnifex that can move up 7 inches. If it's got little squishy stuff in front of it, it can then unload with its Devourers, taking out hopefully a big chunk of things like cultists, or along scouts that have maybe infiltrated, rangers. Bearing in mind, obviously, again, you're still hitting on 3s, so you're a little bit more reliable against some of those units that might be hitting you with maybe a -1. 12 shots, got a good chance of still doing a fair bit of damage with that +1 to your ballistic skill hitting on a 3. So you can take them. It's a very good option. You can take the Death Spitters. The Death Spitters will only give you 6 shots with 2 Death Spitters, or a set of Death Spitters, and they are strength 7. They're strength 7, they also have -1, and they have a 24-inch range, so a little bit more range. So again, bearing in mind you're probably not going to be very, very advanced, you know, because you're only generally moving 7. You're not always going to be in range of that 18 inches first turn, unless your opponent's got the first turn and they're coming very aggressively into your lines, or they've got an awful lot of scouts, rangers, whatever it might be. So that 18 inches potentially won't get you much bang for your buck first turn, whereas potentially with your 7-inch move and your 24-inch guns from your Death Spitters, you're probably going to get a little bit more bang for your buck. So it's not one to definitely to not consider. But for me, you're probably looking at your Devourers, because then you've got a Carnifex that fills 2 jobs really, really effectively. It can shoot very well at something that's quite juicy with its Venom Cannon, and then it can also plough through that annoying infiltrating units, or even start picking away at screens after the first turn. So that's the way that I would take it. But let's talk a little bit about its combat options. So its combat options are, it can take Crushing Claws. Now Crushing Claws are great because they do a flat 3 damage. They're a -3 and they are ×2 to strength, so they make it strength 12, which is very powerful, and that flat 3 is extremely strong, but you -1 to hit. Now bearing in mind that you can't really affect that Carnifex on its own. We will talk about options of how you can improve it, but you're not going to improve it on its own, which means then you're going to be hitting on 5s with those Crushing Claws. That's very poor, very, very poor, and that's a total waste. So unless you are finding other ways of making that work, and we will talk about that a little bit in a minute, unless you're thinking of other ways of doing it, you don't take the claws. Now the monstrous Scything Talons are exactly the same profile, apart from you are on your user strength, so your strength 6. You are not taking the minus to hit, and you're re-rolling 1s to hit. So you're effectively making your Carnifex that much more accurate with Scything Talons, with the opportunity to do just as much damage. So the monstrous Scything Talons are always going to be the way to go if you want to take your combat orientated Carnifex. Now, let's have a little look here. Okay, so the other area to look at from a combat orientated part of this unit is its tail. So the tail for a Carnifex, you have got a couple of options. You can take the Bone Mace or you can take the Fresher Scythe. So let's have a look. So these are options again, and you might want to just completely ignore them if you're going to go out all shooting, or you might think this is a good opportunity to give you a little bit more bang for your buck in combat if you've gone for an all-out shooting Carnifex. So the Bone Mace is strength 8, so you get that bit of extra strength. It is -1 and it is D3 damage. But bear in mind, you can only make one attack with this, so it's not a case of you can use all your attacks on it, you just get to use one attack with it. But, you know, -1's not bad, D3 damage is pretty good. I don't think it's a bad one to look at. The Fresher Scythe is strength 4, so weaker than the Carnifex itself. It's -1, it does 1 damage, but each time the bearer fights, it can make 1 and only 1 attack with this weapon. Make D3 hits for this attack instead of 1. This is an option, this is additional to the bearer's attacks. It's not very good, guys. It's just not very good, because you're only, so let's go on averages, so you're still only getting, you're getting 2 extra attacks on top of the ones we've already spoken about. Of those, 1 of those is going to hit. It's only strength 4, so you're probably on the whole 50-50 chances of even getting it to wound, and then it's -1, so they've got a good chance of saving it, and it only does 1 damage. And it's just not giving you enough attacks to be effective enough against horde units. So it's one not to go for. So if you're going to take one of the tail upgrades, and I don't think it's a bad option to think about, particularly if you are going all shooting, maybe take a Bone Mace, but maybe just keep it bare bones. A lot of the time what you're looking at is the efficiency of that unit, and if your unit is generally going to go out all out shooting, if it's in combat, it's probably not in a great place. Now, I have not spoke about the Living Battering and Ram, which is an opportunity for you to do mortal wounds on the charge, but again, you're going to want to have some close combat weapons if that's going to be an option for you. So, in a nutshell, in summary to the unit as itself, before we start talking about high fleets and we start talking about the stratagems that potentially could be effective with these guys, I would advise that you take these guys in one of 2 different ways. Either you take them as full out shooting, and you do that taking the heavy Venom Cannon and you take a set of Devourers. You then take acute senses to make sure that they are hitting on 3s, and you take Spore Assist to make sure that they are -1 when they are shooting at your Carnifexes. That's how I would take them. It's still relatively cheap. I can't remember the exact points, but I think it comes up to sort of something like 105, 110 points, something like that. I think it's pretty much definitely sub 120. So really, really cheap, and actually very hard to deal with. At 8 wounds with a toughness 7 and a -1 to hit, you're going to be surprised how long those Carnifexes will potentially survive. I would take a unit of 3 of these, because again, why would you not? They're still relatively cheap points. Chuck them down on the battlefield in 1 drop, and then you've got a fair bit of shooting there. You've got lots of Devourer shots, and I would probably keep them all together, even though they can separate. I'd keep them all together, and then I would home down a side or right through the middle and try and really do some multiple damage, so you can pick off a big target with your Venom Cannons, all focus firing on your big target, and then kill all the chaff that's in your way in the form of infiltrators or whatever it might be. And I think it's a very, very effective way of running Carnifexes, and that's how I would run them as a unit. Right, so let's jump in and talk about how to kind of buff these guys using those high fleets and those stratagems. Okay, so let's start off with talking about the actual high fleets themselves and how you possibly take these guys. So let's start off. I like to kind of go through all of these to a degree, but I skip over the ones that really aren't very effective. So the Behemoth ones is not too bad because you are rerolling charges. So if you've gone for a Carnifex with a secondary arm of the Scything Talons, and bearing in mind that you are looking to get those mortal wounds off on the charge, that's not bad because you're much more likely to get those mortal wounds in and do a fair bit of damage. So it's definitely one to look at, and I think it works well for a Carnifex based army or an army that has quite a bit of Carnifexes in them. Kraken for very similar reasons. If you are going combat orientated Carnifexes, this is the one for you. If you have decided to ignore everything we've spoken about and go Screamer Killers, definitely take your Kraken, get these guys advancing, get them up in their face as quick as you possibly can, because you need to not have these guys hanging out in the open. The Screamer Killers do have the Sporocysts, so they are going to be -1, so you just want to be hell for leather up in their face. Hopefully it sticks, you've got enough of them to weather the storm, and then you hit them turn 2. You know, that's great, because the likelihood is you're not going to be able to get in there turn 1. Not likely. You can, probably with 1, but and I don't even think you'd be able to do that, to be fair. Okay, so moving on to Leviathan. Now, Leviathan's not bad. Leviathan's pretty good because they're quite resilient in themselves, having a toughness 7 and -1 to hit, and a 3-up save. You can stick the Leviathan on them, and then when you've got a Synapse creature that's around them, that means that again you're going to get that nice little after 6-up save, which is not something to be dismissed at all. It will make them a lot more survivable. Leviathan, the more you play with, the more you realise is a really strong choice, and I knocked it quite heavily at the end, and you can look back at my videos, and I didn't particularly rate it, but when you play with it and you realise how effective just that 6-up after save is, it's definitely not something to be dismissed. So Leviathan will definitely help them. Gorgon means you can reroll wounds of 1 in the fight phase. It's okay, again it's going to suit your combat ones, but for me, Kraken getting them there quickly and effective, and the Behemoth making sure that they charge in is going to be much more effective than the Gorgon, in my opinion. Hydra is never going to help them, so that's one, because they're never going to be outnumbered and stuff. Kronos is also not going to be very good for them. They don't, because you're only going to have 1 of the heavy Venom Cannons. They've got quite a bit of range, but you're probably still going to be wanting moving them up, and the Kronos depends on them being stationary. So the Kronos is not really going to help them out much as well. And I've left 1 purposely because I believe that this is the magic with your shooting. So Yamaganda, what Yamaganda does is it gives you a cover all the time. So you get a cover against shooting even if you're out in the open. That's incredibly powerful on a 3+ saving unit. So those Carnifexes we've already said, toughness 7, -1 to hit, 3-up save at the moment, 8 wounds. Now let's chuck on the Yamaganda factor on there as well. They've now got a 2-up save. So you're moving this shooting beast up from your lines, your enemies shooting at with weapons that have got, it's now -1. And then on top of that, now you've got a 2-up save. So those weapons that are maybe -1 or -2, you've still got a good chance of making those saves. So I think this is incredibly powerful, and I will be looking at taking a Yamaganda Detachment for your Carnifexes. So you take yourself an HQ, and we'll talk potentially about what HQ you would take, and I bet you can guess, but you take an HQ choice, and then you take 3 units of Carnifexes. So you can take them in 3 singles, or you can take them in maybe 2 big units of 3 and then 1 single, but you can fill up your heavy support choice with 3 units of Carnifexes in a Yamaganda Detachment, and then you take them all with the Sporocysts, so then you've got a massive big chunk of your army that's -1 to hit, that's +1 to hit for you, and that has a 2-up save on a toughness 7 creature. That, guys, is no joke. That is no joke, and that is a serious bit of kit. The great thing, and I'm talking now potentially days, maybe hours before the FAQ, and maybe you're seeing this after the FAQ. And this is my guess. I'm just guessing. I don't know at all. I believe that to curve spam, which is a massive problem in our competitive meta, that they will restrict a much more generalised restriction across taking multiples of the same unit. The great thing about Carnifex is, and I don't know this, I absolutely don't know this, but the great thing about Carnifex is because you can take them in units, there is an option to get quite a lot of these guys when potentially, normally, you won't be able to get more than maybe three of your killer units. This is going to give you an option of taking 3 sets of 3, which is crazy powerful potentially going forward and not to be underestimated. So I'm just going to leave that there, guys. I might be wrong, and tell me in the comments, but I suspect that will be what happens. Anyway, so that's the Hive fleet to go for, particularly if you're going to go shooty variant, because as soon as you advance with that, you lose that cover. As soon as you charge with that, you lose that cover. So for my choice, my flavour of choice to go for that double shooting Carnifex versions, that's the one to go for. If you're going to hedge your bets, then maybe go for Behemoth or for Kraken. Okay, so let's jump into some stratagems and find out what is going to help you with those Carnifex, what's going to get you some serious work with those. Okay guys, so now let's jump in and talk about these stratagems, and there's quite a few you can use, and there's probably more I miss, and if there's one that's really working well for you, stick it in the comments below because it will help other people loads. But let's kind of start off. So rapid regeneration, not a bad one. 2 CPs, quite heavy, and you're probably not going to use it on your Carnifexes, but if you do want to kind of, if they're really struggling to pick away at one, they manage to take 2 or 3 wounds off it, crack the regeneration a stratagem, and you can regain D3 wounds. So it's not terrible. I don't think you're probably going to use it that often. Implant attack's not too bad. So implant, and I'll read it to you because it kind of makes more sense. Use a stratagem after a tyranid unit from your army in the fight phase. It has fault in the fight phase. Roll a dice for each enemy model other than a vehicle that was wounded by any of the unit's attacks and not slain. On a 2+, the model suffers a mortal wound. So that isn't too bad. For you've done a little bit of work in combat, particularly you've taken that kind of combat orientated Carnifex option. You've already done a mortal wound charging in. You've now got the opportunity to do more mortal wounds after the combat's finished. It's only 1 CP, it's not bad. Picking off that last key little character, whatever it might be, it's not a bad one to definitely have up your sleeve. It's very situational, but it could work well for you. Metabolic Overdrive, again, for your combat ones, if you absolutely need to get these guys up nice and quick, you're not necessarily going to be able to do any damage this turn, but you can, do that extra movement, so you can do another run and another charge. You do have to roll a dice on a 1, they lose a mortal wound, but you've got quite a lot of wounds, probably going to be alright. You've got an opportunity to be right in their face, and you're then going to be just piling on that pressure. And as I've said through many of these videos, the biggest tactic with Tyranid that you're going to take throughout is all around the saturation of target. Make your opponent struggle with what the hell they're shooting at. They're like, I do not know how to deal with all these monsters. I do not know how to deal with all this stuff that's in my face. I don't know how to deal with the fact that you're shooting at me so much. That's how you're really making Tyranids effective. You want to be hitting them on all fronts with all weapons and just putting the pressure on. So it's not a bad one, particularly if you're going to go crack them. It's going to make it even more effective. Let's have a quick little look through. Okay, so this one is very strong for your Venom Cannons, very strong, and even not too bad for your Devourers. So it's 2 CPs, which is quite expensive. Use this stratagem in your shooting phase. Select a Tyranid monster, which Carnifex is, from your army. Increase the damage of its attacks by 1 for that phase. Right, so guys, I was listening to a podcast and they told me something that is frighteningly powerful, and something that has not been FAQ'd and is a real thing. Is a real thing, and it is nasty as hell. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of information. I'm going to give you a little trick that you might know, and if you do know, that's cool. If you don't know, this is a bit of a eureka moment. So Let's listen to the wording of this. Use the stratagem in your shooting phase. Does not say at the beginning of your shooting phase. Does not say at the end of your shooting phase. It says in your shooting phase. So what you can do is you can shoot at something, you can do damage to it, they can save the wounds and fail them, and you can say, I'm going to use this stratagem. That weapon has then done an extra damage on each one. How horrible is that? And I don't think it's necessarily intended, I really don't, but we use the tools that we've got, guys. We use the tools we've got. We're only going to be using this on one model, but a Carnifex that's shooting you with a Venom Cannon that does 3 damage, that suddenly anything that gets through, you can decide to make it 4 damage. Or those Devourers that are doing 1 damage, suddenly are doing 2 damage, and you're hosing down Primus Marines, or doing damage to bikes, whatever it might be. You can absolutely do that, and that is fair. Because not at any point in that stratagem does it say that it needs to be used at any precise time. It does not say before the unit shoots, it does not say when wounds are done, it does not say after saves are done. It just says in the shooting phase. This stratagem, use the stratagem in your shooting phase, select a tyranid monster from your army, increase the damage of its attacks by 1. Crazy, mind blown, mind absolutely blown. If you're playing friendly games, just warn your opponent if you're going to do that, or maybe don't do it. But in a competitive game, I'm telling you guys, that is rules as written and plain as simple on the page. You know, tell me what you think. That's crazy. Right, okay, so moving on swiftly. So what other things have we got here? So we've got Death Frenzy, not too bad. Opportunity to again fight afterwards or shoot after they die. Can be good, those Venom Cannons, but you know, sets again, it's 2 CPs, it's quite expensive. Overrun is not bad, so if you kill something, again you've got an assault unit, you've killed something, and then you can then move and advance again and carry on. You're almost like kind of trying to consolidate into the next combat. You can't, because you've got to stay outside 1 inches, but it's almost again harks back to those good old days of a combat Carnifex that would consolidate from combat into combat into combat, which is pretty funny. And I'll tell you what, guys, that's more or less it. Now there are some other ones in there, 100%, and I'd love to hear the ones that are working really effectively for you. Of course there's the option of, you know, attacking again. You can't shoot again because they're not an infantry unit, but you can attack them again, I believe. Let me just double check it. Yes, you can, so you definitely can attack them again, but bear in mind they're only a unit for deployment, they're not a unit once they're on the battlefield, so it's only going to be 1 Carnifex. Are you going to spend 3 CPs on 1 Carnifex to make them attack again? There's probably other things you're going to make use of more. But again, you've got a Screamer Killer Carnifex, you absolutely need to kill something, you've buffed the living daylights out of this thing, maybe that's when you do it. So, you know, there you go. So that is more or less it, apart from I want to touch on one other thing, the same as I did in the Gene Stealer video. I want to talk about how to kind of buff these guys slightly differently, and that is by taking the HQ choice that is the beautiful, the amazing Old One Eye. So Old One Eye is a character Carnifex. It's nice because he's a character now, so he's got 9 wounds, he is under the 10 wound threshold, so he can sit behind and not be targeted, which is great, but he has some really good buffs that he can do to your Carnifexes. So if you're taking this detachment, and this is what I think you should do, you take your detachment of Carnifexes, and you know, you want to make them more effective. So particularly if you're taking ones with combat and shooting, then Old One Eye is going to be very effective. If you're taking all shooting, you're maybe just taking a cheap and cheerful HQ, or you're taking a Hive Tyrant in there, and you know, and that's one of your Hive Tyrants you're going to use. Probably because you're taking Yamaganda, you might rather make use of a different unit as your HQ that will make use more of that that Hive fleet. So. But that's your choice, guys. But either way, Old One Eye, if you've got any kind of combat options on your Carnifex, is going to make them very good. So Old One Eye, and we're not going to go into him in detail, but we're just going to hit on a couple of things. So one, we've already spoke about the fact that he's a character, which is awesome. He also is pretty resilient in the fact that he heals a wound each turn. You're going to make him Yamaganda, which is going to make him have a 2+ save, which is decent. He doesn't have the -1, but then again he can't be targeted, so that's good. But the big thing for him is he has a rule called Alpha Leader. Now Alpha Leader means you can add 1 to the hit rolls in the fight phase for any Hive Fleet Carnifex within 6 inches of the model. So that very ineffective claws that were hitting on 5s are now back to hitting on 4s. And that is pretty powerful in itself, because it's going to mean that the other Carnifexes that are hitting on 4s are suddenly hitting on 3s because of his +1. That's incredibly powerful. I'm just going to have a little look at his Warlord Traits, because I believe that is also something that adds a little bit of extra strength to him. Okay. So he has adaptive biology, which is not bad, because that will mean that at the end of the fight phase, and the Warlord suffers his first wound, for the remainder of the battle you reduce the damage by 1. So again, just making him that little bit more survivable. So yeah, he's very, very good. He's a nasty punch. He's something else your opponent's got to think about. He's potentially sitting behind a load of Carnifexes that are also equally dangerous, and something to look at. He's still not really cheap, and points efficiency is ultimately the key to being very competitive. But I would definitely be looking at giving him a go and see how he works out for you, because he does synergize so well with that Carnifex army. So give him a go. Go for 6 Carnifexes, you know, 2 units of 3 with your heavy Venom Cannon, and I would still probably go with Talons, but maybe mix in a couple of claws in there as well. Run them with old One Eye, maybe another one as well, chuck another Carnifex in there, and then you've got your detachment that gives you 1 CP. You've got a wicked unit in the old One Eye, and then you've also got a tons of shooting, nice bit of kick in combat, and a unit that's not that easy to kill with that +1 cover, +1 save from the Yamaganda, and that -1 to hit. So that's how I would definitely give it a go. I think the most competitive build is you don't take old One Eye, you take them all shooting. You still take a Yamaganda, and you probably take a Neurophrope as your HQ. He doesn't do very much, just gives you that little bit of extra psychic buff. He can kind of go up as a character behind those Carnifexes, potentially, you know, do a little bit of buffing work, can debuff some of your opponent, can put an extra smite in there, make sure they're all kind of in synapse range, and again can't be targeted, and then let the rest of your army do its own thing. That's how I would take them out of choice, and that's how I'm kind of testing it at the moment. I think they're going to become even more useful after the FAQ, when we see a new meta arrive in the system and in the scene. But let me know how you guys are getting on with them, how you're running your Carnifexes, what's working for you. Be really interested to hear any mistakes I've made in this video. Again, just chuck them down in the comments. Love to hear it. I'm trying my best, guys, for you, but we always make mistakes. So by all means, put those comments in there. But until the next video, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.